Welcome back, Kerbinauts. This is Kerbin Skies, Episode 3. If you're new here, which seems likely because I don't have a lot of followers right now, this is my Kerbal Space Program career mode. We left off with Valentina Kerbin in orbit, en route to the moon. So we're doing this without a tracking station upgrade, which means we have no orbit capture predictions. So we're kind of flying this blind, and we're doing it with Kerbal. A little risky. But you can't really blame the Kerbals. Apparently, figuring out gravity is really hard. So you can see here I'm just burning to not hit the moon. That would be really good because Valentina would like to come back to Kerbin. And I get up here and I decide that I'm actually just going to orbit. I'm going to orbit because otherwise my ejection angle will simply fling me out into this much wider orbit. And I've played Kerbal Space Program enough to know that, even though the Kerbals possibly don't. But I'll collect some science here and make sure we get our first Kerbal EVA near the moon. And alright, what I'm trying to do is get up to Apoap's there and then raise my periaps back out to escape the moon in the other direction. That way, being flung away from the moon would slow me down, but as you can see, that didn't work. I wasn't actually in orbit of the moon. That is a failure of the tracking station's ability to predict whether or not I was in orbit. So I'm in this big orbit, and I'm really worried that this isn't going to be enough fuel. So, well, what else can I do? Just start burning retrograde. Although, depending on how much life support I have, it might be a better idea to go for Apoaps, but it takes long enough to get out to the moon's orbit. I don't have that much time, so I decide to kind of halfway bring my Apoaps down to moon-ish. And then from here I'll go to lower my periaps to Kerbin. So we'll see how low we get. 8,000,076, 5,000,000, 4, 3. Come on. It looks like my fuel is actually going to be okay. Still got another 600 meters per second on this. Oh yeah. In fact, my periaps just went negative. That's a little too much. Alright, flip around and actually get a positive number. And just because I'm worried about re-entry here, when I get up close to Kerbin, I'm actually going to use what's left of my fuel to try to bleed off a little bit of velocity without dropping my periaps. That will require a little bit of burning radial out / retrograde. Somewhere in there between those two vectors. I gotta say though, I do appreciate the orbital scenery. Whoa, this is my favorite right here, just falling back to Kerbin. I think that's just the prettiest thing. Alright. So now I gotta figure out where exactly to burn so that my periap stays roughly the same spot, but I lose a lot of velocity. So I'm going back and forth and just tweaking it, so I'm watching my periaps as, falling very slowly at this rate, so I turned a little bit more radial. It's just back and forth a little bit like this. I like my periaps between 23 and 25. At this point, I know we'll be fine. We're coming back and much more sedately than straight from the moon. And aside from being hit, almost being hit by that thing, this goes off without a hitch. Valentina's safe. She has come home from the vicinity of the moon. Technically just a flyby. We thought we were in orbit, but that went well. So here is the beginnings of the Kerbin ComSat network. yes, we have 3 probes, and there are little antennas on there. They should be pretty self-sufficient. Trying to do this all in one launch with the new standardized launch system I developed in the last video. And, well, the apoapse just isn't as high as it was supposed to be, and although it had the Delta V on paper to reach orbit, this was not working. Yeah, I overloaded the launcher. Technically, it was capable of lifting it, but it didn't quite make it. That was unfortunate. So have a look at my funds here. I've got about 60,000. And one of these Tau rocket launches costs about 10,000. So this is about 6 launches. So this is supposed to be an unmanned moon lander. So I've got a contract for science from the surface of the moon, and this is supposed to get me there. Once I fix the staging. Never fails. Alright, here we go. You'll notice this again takes off very laboriously. I am overloading my launcher again. I have not learned my lesson, apparently. So, well, at least it's going better than the last attempt. So, notice though my apoapse is only about 46 kilometers, so it is kind of struggling. Like, again, it has the Delta V on paper, but my ascent was just a little shallow, and I was, a little too aggressive on the turnover. So here, I've got an apoapse of 70 kilometers now, but, well, I decided to, glide to apoapse. It's very, it's very habitual. Glide up to apoapse and realize I have no control. You see me keep firing my engine and I'm pointing radial because I can't turn. And it's just too little too late, and I skim back into the atmosphere with a periapse of 50,000. So close, and yet so far. Yeah, this was supposed to be deployed and launched after the comm network. So it didn't work. Yeah, I'm just... yeah, there's no saving it at this point. It's just doomed. At least we get to appreciate the fireworks as this comes screaming in from the upper atmosphere and carpet bombs the desert. We'll take this as an object lesson that we do in fact need a comm network. So I built 3, and they're all going to be launched separately. You can see them here, A, B, and C. We are launching A right now. Each of these being 10,000 funds, this has pretty much cut my budget in half already. I figure it's a good investment because if we get these into orbit where they can do some good, future missions will be much less prone to errors and just simpler in general. Now, I'm used to doing these in a single launch. I'm used to using the orbital period. You get 2/3 of your final orbital period with a stage that has all of your comm satellites, and then drop 1 every orbit. Well, in this case, I'm just gonna have to eyeball it, so there's really nothing else to it. At the moment, I just want something that'll do. Like, I literally cannot afford to be too picky about it. As far as placement relative to each other. As long as they can talk to each other and bounce a signal around Kerbin, it'll do. Cutting right ahead, we are launching Satellite B. And it's the same launch as before, so I tried experimenting briefly with the idea of launching them 2 hours apart for Kerbin's 6-hour day, but then I realized this is not geosynchronous orbit, so it really wouldn't matter. So all that matters is the current placement in the orbit. It's like a rendezvous, but you're not trying to hit the same target. But I did something really stupid here. So I've set up my maneuver node, but watch my electric charge, it's gone. Yep, by the time I get up to circularize my orbit, the solar panels, you may notice, are pointed away from the sun, and my periaps is still inside the atmosphere. There's no hope for this thing. So I just have to watch helplessly as it plummets back to Kerbin, rather like the moon lander that I was supposed to be sending a few days ago. Man. You realize this makes, of the last 4 launches, 3 have been failures. By now, I'm sure Bob has hired an entire PR team to run damage control for him. Congress is having serious concerns, considering all these launch failures lately. More immediately, we have only about 10,000 funds left. So a lot went into something called Goliath that's being built right now. That is a prototype, my size 1.5 lifter. It's very promising. It's very powerful. But before that's finished, we have one more ComSat scheduled to go up, and despite the failure of the last one, we're going to give it a shot. It is a known quantity, at least. We know we've had issues with it, but like the launch went off fine. It was just the solar panels being pointed in the wrong direction. We'll have to be careful about that. Unfortunately, I didn't quite anticipate the fairing taking out one of my communications antenna. Well, it still has one that works. We'll take what we can get. So here's our final orbit. It's matched in orbital period, and it happens to be pretty much on the exact opposite side of the planet compared to the other one. I would have preferred to put them in line of sight of each other so they could actually bounce the signal around more, but I'm not going to mess with it at this point. So, funding is getting worrisome. I definitely have to be considering how I can use every possible resource at this point. And one of the big ones that's been sitting around is this prototype lifter. So I decided to mount a probe on top of it. It's highly experimental. The prototype lifter hasn't even been tested. But on paper, this thing is more than capable enough, and this upper stage probe, we're thinking maybe take it to Minmus? If I don't get some world first records and get some payout from that with this launch, I may be in serious trouble. Here it is, folks, the first launch of the Goliath. This is... I'm very happy with this design. I forgot the fins, so this is going to be really hard to control at first, but you know what? We'll go with it. So one of my contracts is for orbital rendezvous, so that's one thing we can do with this. We might be able to have enough fuel to rendezvous with one of my existing satellites in orbit, and then make it all the way to Minmus. If we can do that, we'll be set. So here I am trying to set up my rendezvous with one of my comm satellites, because what else do I have? It's already in orbit. I didn't want to spend a whole nother launch just to give myself a rendezvous target. So I've got my maneuver node set up. I'm just going to point at it and coast up to where I need to make my burn. And if you look in the top right, you'll notice my electric charge is already dropping. Yes, I've done it again. My solar panels are in shadow, and I just don't notice this. And so, by the time I get up to my maneuver node, it's dead, and the entire launch is wasted. At least my periaps is above the atmosphere this time. At least there's that. Like, it's not gonna... It's got so much Delta V. All I need to do is go up and, like, give it a nudge, so its solar panels get some light, and it will live again with all this fuel. You know what? I'm gonna do that. I'm going to build another comm satellite, but on its way, because they've all gotten to orbit with plenty of fuel left over. So this comm satellite is going to rendezvous with this probe and give it a nudge, and hopefully that means I'll have saved this. I can do something with it. Get some more funds that way. Unfortunately, the purchase will leave me with a grand total of 38 funds. Not 38,000, 38. You can't even buy lunch for that. So, I'm even forced to sell my Cambot, which is this handy little thing I rolled off the launch pad early on, covered in cameras. That's how I've gotten my still images, where I get a view of a rocket launch from some stationary point near the ground. That was the Cambot. And that's what I just sold. That nets me a few thousand anyway. At least I can buy my Kerbals dinner. I wouldn't want them running this mission without dinner, after all. So here we are with the comm satellite that we're definitely going to void the warranty on this, because we're going to do a little bit more than just rendezvous. Now, if I get the rendezvous by itself, that will actually be worth something. That we do have a contract for that. And you can barely see it, but this fairing has taken out one of my antennae again. You'd think I would have fixed that. Anyway, Bob has figured out the nuts and bolts of orbital rendezvous. First, we just gotta get a nice intersecting orbit, do a little plane change correction, and then wait for our intersect. Let's get it nice and close here. And here we are at our close approach, just gonna burn to kill relative velocity. At this point, I feel like I got this. I already got the rendezvous contract. And it'd just be awesome if I can give this spacecraft a little nudge so its solar panels can get some light. While I'm sighing in relief over these contracts and the windfall I just got, a little careful maneuvering will bring us nice and close together with low relative velocity. By the time I get in close, my electric charge is gone. Well, hopefully this is just because I'm on the night side of Kerbin. So I time warp forwards a little bit, hope I can restore that intersect, but you may already notice, once again, my solar panels are pointed directly away from the sun. Fortunately, Bob hadn't yet told Congress that they had planned this little nudge maneuver. So the rendezvous is seen as a success, and with a little luck, the space program will be able to recover from these financial setbacks and budget cuts. Bob is rolling out a plan for a program he calls Capricorn, and we'll get a glimpse of it on the next episode of Kerbin Skies.